Hello, the purpose of this video is to show you how you can do a quantitative assessment of supply and demand. We're going to be looking at a market, and this could be, for example, the world market for oil, and we're going to be considering several different kinds of shocks to supply curves and demand curves, and our results are going to be quantitative. They're going to be percentage changes in prices and percentage changes in quantity, and the whole in quantity supplied and demanded. And the whole idea here is that we want to go beyond the geometric representation where we have downward sloping supply curves and upward sloping demand curves shifting around on a board, because we came into this process knowing about physical quantities, for example, billion barrels of oil and percentage changes, and we want to link up the geometric representation to those percentage changes. So if I can point out here, we're going to be starting off, we have some baseline scenarios, and we have a baseline scenario where there's no shocks to income on the demand side, that the shifters for the demand curve, no shocks to income, world income we're looking at here, and also no other autonomous shocks to demand. And over here on capacity, we're going to have no increases or decreases in capacity relative to its long run value, and likewise there are going to be no other disruptions, increases or decreases to supply. And then over here we're just looking at, here's the baseline equilibrium. So in the absence of any shocks, the natural price, of course, we're assuming to be about $100 per barrel, and the natural quantity is about 89.5 billion barrels per day. So now what we're going to do is we're going to calculate prices and quantities under these alternative scenarios. Scenario one, we're assuming a little bit of an upturn in the world economy, 1/2% above the natural value. And then here we're looking at an autonomous shock, another increase to demand. We're predicting that our weather in the United States and Europe is going to be a little bit colder this year, and for that reason the demand curve is going to shift to the right. Under alternative one, there's no supply shocks, there's no capacity shocks, and the political situation in oil producing countries is benign. Over here we have a kind of a different story. We're not going to have the demand shock here, so on the income side, but we are still expecting winter to be a little bit colder, so we do want to contemplate the effect of this 1% shock to demand. And then over here on the supply side, we're expecting the possibility of some hostilities in oil producing countries, and if these hostilities take place, the supply curve would shift to the left by 1%. So these are the scenarios that we're going to look at. Now down here we have equations for the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity, so all we need to do is apply these equations, and I'm going to focus in a little bit here so I can look at them and see them a little bit larger. So let's take a look first of all what our price would be under alternative one, and it's just the natural price multiplied times 1 plus. Now let's go up and get the supply capacity here. Okay, so the supply capacity is simply 1, and before I do anything else I want to cordon this off with a parenthesis, the supply capacity multiplied by our capacity shock, which we know in this case is just 0, but we have to put it in there anyway. And then, okay, if we look at the equation, we want to subtract off, and we're going to go get the income elasticity for demand. So that's this 1.5, and we're going to multiply that times our 0.5 here, our increase in world income. And then our third shock is going to be simply the autonomous shock to supply, and we're going to add that in. And then our fourth item here is going to be the autonomous shock to demand, and we're going to subtract that off, and then we're going to put a paren around this, and we're going to divide this through. We have a denominator term down here, which is the difference between the price elasticities of supply and demand, and we have that ready made for us. It's already calculated. That's here. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to pin the parameters down. So anything that's a parameter here, we're going to pin it down. I'm using my F4 key, but you can just put in the dollar signs. And then these are variables, that's a variable, but this denominator term is also okay. and here we notice that the price rises by a little bit under 11%. And how do we know? Why is that a sensible result? Because we had two things happening on the demand side that shifted the demand to the right. Okay, now we can take these terms because we have pinned everything down here. Okay, we're going to take these terms and we're going to copy them over here like this. Okay, so now, okay, here we see that our price has risen by an even higher amount. Instead of 11%, it's risen by 12.5%. Why is that? Because no, we don't have the impulse of world income, but we do have an adverse shock to supply. A leftward shift of the supply curve, and that's also going to be an element that will contribute to an increase in the equilibrium price. Okay, so now, so far on the price side, everything makes sense. So now we're going to look at our quantity equation. So what we need to do is we need to start off with our equilibrium quantity. That's multiplied times 1 plus what? We have to go and we have to get our price elasticity of demand. Our price elasticity of demand, which is that guy here, this is minus 0.08. You'll notice that's pretty small. And before I go further, once again, no, I don't have to cordon things off in this case here. And then I'm going to multiply that through times what? Times this equilibrium increase in price that I've just got done calculating here. And then the next thing that I need to do is I need to go and put on a plus sign, and I need to go upstairs and get my income elasticity of demand, and then I need to multiply that also times our change in world income. Okay, and then our last guy here is the autonomous shock to demand. Do we have one? Yes, we do, because we said that the winter is going to be a little bit cold. And yes, the quantity side, we could have done it from the supply side, but it really doesn't matter. But the point is that at the end of the day, this is going to be a little bit easier calculation. Okay, so and I'm pinning down my parameters here, and there we go. And we can see that we have a small increase in the quantity, our quantity increases from 89.5 to 90.28 here. And okay, we'll notice that that's a rather kind of a small increase in the quantity, and we notice that this is not the full extent of our increase in our shocks. Why? Because we also know that the price rose, and when the price rises, that's going to choke off some of the extra demand. And then before I do that, let's pin down our baseline. So let's make sure that we have everything pinned down here. That is, in fact, a parameter, and there we go. And now I'm going to copy this guy over here, and okay. And now, well, we're going to be this is instructive here, that there's actually something wrong here, and maybe you guys can see what it is. So because there's really we have to take into account the fact that there's this change in this well, actually, I think we may be okay here, because what do we have? We have an increase. We have the quantity, the equilibrium quantity times 1 plus, let's go through our elasticities again. We have to have the price elasticity of demand. Let's make sure that we have that. Okay, so we have the price elasticity of demand. That's M12. Okay, and then we're going to multiply that times what? Times the equilibrium increase in the price. That's going to be N, and we're going to look at here as being 43. So here's our 12% increase, plus our income elasticity, which once again, let's have that. That's going to be M13. Okay, and we're multiplying that times our income shock, and then we're going to add in our demand shock, and once again we have a demand shock. So it turns out that in this case, yes, this is a very it's a very interesting result, because what happens here is that even though we do have an increase in demand, because we have this disruption to supply, we're going to have an increase in the price, and that's going to squeeze out all of the additional demand. So in fact, it's going to cancel exactly. So we're going to end up with the same equilibrium quantity that we had in the first place. So that's a kind of a interesting result. It's just one shock exactly offsets the other. So we'll be back in a few seconds so we can look at the contributions approach.